Welcome to the Inspiring Leadership Podcast, where we seek to elevate your leadership and transform your workplace. My name is Dominic Siow. I'm delighted to be the host of this show. With my team at eqstrategist, we seek to bring you a dose of healthy inspiration and practical insights into how to enhance team performance, cultivate resilience, foster collaboration, and shape culture. Welcome to another episode of the Inspiring Leadership Podcast, where we explore not just what great leaders do, but how they think, feel, and show up to make a lasting impact. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce someone I had the absolute pleasure of meeting recently at the business storytelling course. And within moments of talking, I knew I had to bring him onto this podcast. Peter Teichmann is a leader who has lived an extraordinary life. Over 5 decades in the Royal Australian Navy, rising to the role of Deputy Director of Innovation, where he helped shape the Navy's future culture. But that's just the beginning. He's also been a national level coach in sports aerobics, worked with elite athletes, even Olympians, and taken on dragon boat racing with the same commitment he brought to the Navy, with intensity, purpose, and heart. Peter, such a blessing. We finally made it. We've been talking about this for, a couple of months now, ever since we first met at the business storytelling course that had the privilege of having you as a wonderful participant, and just drawing on the conversation we had after that. I was like, man, the world has to learn more about this extraordinary human being. And thank you so much for your time and the grace of sharing of your life journey today, Peter. Really, really honored.
And Dominic, thank you. That course that I attended with you, that was outstanding. It was probably one of the best courses that I have ever done. And I say that for the reason that I remember everything. I remember the reactions. I remember your smile. I remember your welcome. It and just made such a difference. And here we are today. So thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be sitting here with you. I've looked at your other podcasts, and now I'm sitting here, doing the same. So it's an absolute privilege to share a little bit of my life with you.
Thank you, Peter. 54 years veteran, Royal Australian Navy. What an amazing career. Starting off as a young sailor in Vietnam, and then moving all the way to, I think your last position there was Deputy Director of Innovation. So that's been a storied journey. But not only that, your stories about coaching Olympians, dragon boat racing, recovering from a, heart surgery, bypass just about a year ago. Man, what a phenomenal life. But you know what? Before you jump too far ahead of myself, just like to maybe have the audience learn a little bit more about your wonderful story. Take us back to the beginning, Peter. You've had 54 years in the Royal Australian Navy. How did it all begin?
Joining the Navy was quite interesting. My parents, after they moved from the Nullarbor Plain, working on the railway sidings because they migrated from Germany in the 1950s. And eventually they moved to a place which is on the verge of the desert and called Port Augusta. And Port Augusta is affectionately known as Port Augusta because it is just dust and heat, and it's not a pleasant place to be. But my parents, being migrants and wanted to build a business, they bought the what they call the refreshment rooms from the Commonwealth Railways and established that. Now I would go and help on the GAN, which goes up to Alice Springs, and I'd put my little suit on and take a tray out and give people cups of tea and coffee and take their orders and so forth. But other times when I spent at the railway station, there was a guy in a Navy uniform, and always on his own. It seemed maybe 4 times a year, and I loved the uniform. I loved those bells. I loved the. I just something intrigued me. And then Dad saw that, and Dad said, his name is Colin True, and he said to Colin, can you go and talk to Peter and tell him that if he wants to be something in his life, he needs to study a little bit harder, because Dad wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, which was traditional in those days. and he gave me all the books which I read, and so I was preparing myself to be a doctor. I got accepted, into studying this, and I did my first year, and I realised that I'm not going to be a good doctor because I don't like when people are sick. It just didn't work for me. So Colin was in my mind, and I was just laying on a grassed area, and I saw, this is a Navy brochure. So I decided to join, and so that's where it started. And all I knew was a sailor. So I put my application in. Dad wasn't very happy at the time, but he accepted it. So I went to Adelaide, passed my recruiting, joined the Navy. Mum said farewell on a train, and that's where my journey in institutionalised after boarding school life began. And so I went to Melbourne. First thing all the recruits, they yelled out, "You'll be sorry," and it'll be something along those lines. And I thought, what have I done? And but I went through the 12 weeks of training, and I just went through the normal course. That's where it started, and got promoted in minimum time. To from recruit to ordinary seaman, and that's when I went to Vietnam. We can talk about that later. And then we went able seaman, leading seaman, petty officer, and I thought, I'm better than this. I had another vision, and so I decided to change over. Yeah, so kind of, I think that's the introduction. It's a very long introduction how it started, but certainly that's the way I progress. So I'll talk a little bit more about Vietnam if you like, and
absolutely. So when you say you progressed, then it was almost like whilst you stayed at the Royal Australian Navy,
Yes.
you progressed because in the sense of you made a career shift.
Yes.
From being a seaman.
Yes.
Into.
So then a petty officer, then
okay.
chief petty officer I got promoted to. Then they offered me warrant officer, which is the most senior of the lower ranks. We won't say lower ranks. Let's say they call it the lower deck.
Right.
And so it's the non-commissioned officers. And when I realised, in fact, can I just backtrack a bit?
Of course.
In this area. What happened, I studied hotel management. And just because I wanted to do something. And then I went, at the top of the cross, there was a King's Cross in Sydney, there was a hotel, and I was a petty officer then, and I said, I would like to be the front office manager.
Really?
And they said to me, what do you mean you want to be the front office manager? And I said, is there a position available? And they said, no, you have to have experience in the hotel industry. I said, I don't need experience. I'm a leader in the Navy.
Wow.
And they said, you can't. He said, what we'll do is, we'll give you some jobs in housekeeping and, see how you can progress in this area. And eventually they sent me a letter of offer. But at the same token, Navy sent me a letter of offer to do industrial engineering work study. And I chose that instead of the hotel. And
so instead of the hotel, you took up
industrial engineering and studied that in Albury, Wodonga, part of the University of New South Wales. And what happened from that is I decided to change over to an officer.
Right.
I thought I've got so much more to offer. And so I went through the normal procedures, selection procedures, and become a young officer. And the commander at the time, he said, and it sounds like I'm very arrogant, but I wasn't. It was just my nature that I had this vision. And but the commander who was in charge of the work study branch, which is industrial engineering or systems analysis these days, and he said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That typical question. And I said, in your chair.
Really?
And I think he fell off backwards.
Wow.
And what happened? I got selected, did the study, and progressed through. In that particular branch, and that gave me a whole spectrum of experience. How to run businesses and how to improve productivity and so forth.
Fascinating. Peter, we speak about leadership, and one of the key traits, emotional intelligence, makes you a leader, right? Quite beyond the technical competencies that you have. And already I'm gleaning, some of the secrets of your 54 years extraordinary service. You retired February this year?
February this year.
After 54 years of distinguished service, and clearly there's always that the traits seem to be about goal setting, having a clear vision, having a can-do mindset, and that self-confidence, not arrogance, but just being very certain and assertive of where you want to get to. What shaped you? What would you say contributed to that trait? Was it drummed into you by your parents, by your teachers? What is it?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. It's interesting to see, what really shaped me. My sister, more stepsister, she was 10 years older, so essentially I was an only child.
Oh, okay.
And because she had a boyfriend, and the last thing you want is a young 10-year-old junior following her in her footsteps. So really, I had to find my own life, and so I dreamt a lot. I think, I think that's what it was. I did a lot of walking alone. I dreamt, and with that dreaming, you see a goal, you see something, and so Navy, and funny enough, my father wanted me to join him on a trip to Western Australia by sea, take a ship from Adelaide to Perth. And I said, I am never going on a ship because I'm scared of the water, that might tip over. And ironically, I ended up joining the Navy and commanding a ship, so. But what inspired me was it was always trying to fit in. Being German, in my youth, you weren't accepted in the 50s because that was very close to the war. Going to boarding school, you have to fit in. You just have to fit in with people, and sport was one of the ways that people would like you. Being 14, 15 at boarding school, girls are very, very important to your life, and study isn't.
Right.
So I thought I have to become good at sport.
Right.
And so I practiced every night, and I made a goal. And so I was lucky enough to play Australian rules football, and got selected, like they have the Australian Football League today.
Really?
I was selected by a team called Sturt, so they selected all the A-grade players.
Sturts or stunts?
Sturt, not stunts. Not stunts. No, so, wasn't there?
I thought they would have suited you really well.
Anyway, I got selected there. I got into B grade in the South Australian Football League, and then I thought I like basketball, so I practiced basketball, and it was so that became natural for me,
Right.
because of I had one skill in basketball that nobody could seem to understand. And it was a fast break, and I was very, very fast, and I don't know how I did it, and I shot a lot of goals. So they then interviewed me for the Australian team,
Right.
in basketball, and there was another basketballer. He was the same height as I was. We were the shortest basketballs ever in that squad, and I lost my nerve, and which was actually good. And Eddie Pavlovinskas, he was the basketballer, and he made the Australian team and did very well. But I went on to do different things, and so I realised what's required, which is a good mind and a good vision,
Yeah.
to succeed.
Amazing.
It's as simple as that, and crying. is not anything to be embarrassed about, because I did sit in the corner and cried when I didn't make the team. But it happens, and that's part of that journey, where you grow.
Beautiful. Fantastic. I think that's the key. I think you speak about having that goal. And I think firstly, it was really interesting that you said that you spend time daydreaming. In the Asian culture that I grew up, very often when you're gazing into the distance, or still remember coming home, and in Malaysia, we didn't have much growing up. And I still remember the times when I'm shirt off, and I'm just lying on the floor because it's so hot and humid.
Yes.
On the cement floor, just to chill and just daydream. And very often my very loving parents would be like, "Hey, stop daydreaming. Go, do your homework."
Yes, yes.
We weren't encouraged.
Doing that.
Yeah, we weren't encouraged. And yet, if you think about it today, what makes us stand out compared to, our closest relative, the chimpanzees, is this power of imagination, the ideas. Even us being here in this amazing studio just started off as being someone's idea, and then, of course, backed up with that wonderful execution. That when I hear about your career, you've always done everything whether it's in Olympics or dragon boat racing, or whether it's in your naval career, deputy director of innovation, it always seems to be intensity, impact, purpose. Those were the things that stood out. And yet it starts off with cultivating, I think, what's innately in us. Have a dream and then make yourself responsible for fulfilling it. Right? Being a person of impact. Although, it sounds like in your early days, due to perhaps a sense of loneliness, not having people around and wanting to stand out, which is normal, right? You felt like achieving the goal and being great at it would be a path to that. But in the process of it, you found gifts and talents and skills that you probably weren't even aware that you had.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm still not aware of them all.
And a wonderful trait. And it's one of the things that I cherish so much about you, because retired commander, retired deputy director of innovation, and you were one of my best participants at the workshop, just eager to learn, enthusiastic. And here I am meeting you at that time, not knowing what your background was, but always coming from that amazing humility, that desire to grow, to be even better, regardless of what the station.
Thank you, Dominic. That's very kind.
Absolutely fascinating. I'd like to unpack that a little bit. You're one of the few people that have come into my life that's got the amazing background that you have. Navy, 54 years, Vietnam veteran. How did it feel first time going out there to Vietnam as a young, would you call yourself a seaman at that time?
I was, yes. I was the lowest rank that could possibly be.
Right.
I don't think we understood what Vietnam was about. Back in the early 70s, if you were a low rank, you just did as you're told. You would never answer back to anybody. Very similar to growing up, I guess, in different cultures. And so that there was excitement, but there was also that survival, inbuilt survival.
Okay.
So I don't think I even thought about, I'm in the middle of a war. I never thought that that there was danger around it, but there was. We saw the bombs, we saw the fighter jets flying over. We heard it. We had to go ashore, and you see those landing party to get the army in, and you can see some of the horrific incidents that happened with the children and so forth. So but you come back to the safety of your ship. I think the most profound thing that I remember, in all of this is the commanding officer at the time. He said, "Look, if we go in alone, we have a 2-minute lifespan," and I never forget that. And
2-minute lifespan.
2-minute lifespan, because if you haven't got a convoy of ships around you supporting, it takes one plane to come in, and you don't get much time, because they come in very, very quickly off the horizon, and that's basically the end. And kind of that scared me for a little bit, but because you're working so hard and there's activity all the time, you don't realize where you are. In some,
You just focus on the mission.
you focus on that mission, and I was very lucky. Obviously, I didn't have to do what the army did, and go through the jungles and trudge through the mud and live in tents. So. I won't say it's easy. It was a 7-month deployment over there, but I'm privileged that I didn't have to go through what some of those army people go through, and they've suffered long term because of that. So I have a great deal of respect, for anybody that goes to fight for their country. I'll always respect that the veterans. Because they unfortunately they do suffer. But I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. And a huge shout out to everyone who serves our amazing nation, you included. I know sometimes we may take it for granted, not really knowing what you all go through. And yet when Sue and I visited Korea last year, and we love culture and history, and we went to this war museum. And it's just fascinating. You go out there, and have you been to Seoul?
Yes, I have.
The War Memorial.
Yes.
You see the quadrangle right in front with all the flags, and and you read about this, this whole countries that sent their amazing people, thousands and thousands and thousands, who will go out there and risk, and in some instances give their lives for total strangers.
That's
just
right.
to give them the life, it is a philosophical war.
Yes.
So Korea really was about that.
Yes.
Right, and which I'm sure Vietnam was as well. And yet, that sense of freedom, right? Giving that as a right for human beings so that they could have that. And I think that the strong bonds of gratitude, I think, for the Koreans have for everyone else. But certainly for me, going to places like that, my level of respect and appreciation went to another level. Knowing that all these countries had sent their people, and the sacrifices made by their families, their parents, because many lives were lost.
Yes.
There, for literally, so that a stranger could have a much better life, and a life in terms of freedom, right? That the democracy offers, right? So, anyway,
A very important.
huge salute to you and all
Thank you.
wonderful people. You mentioned, in the context of leadership, it was interesting that you went to this war, and you said that you were just doing what you were told to do. What specifically do you remember? What did you go into Vietnam thinking that you were going to do?
Look, I really didn't know. I really didn't know. The next rank up, which was leading seaman, they just told us, paint the decks. Right, we don't like the paint. You left a little bit of a gap there, so paint it again. You go down into the magazine, and I want you to, get these shells, prepared, because we'll be firing, in an hour. It was because you were below decks mostly. You didn't really understand what was happening outside. However, we did. There was an operation that we had to do when we were in the harbour, and the Viet Cong they would try and swim out to the ships, and then they would put mines underneath the ship and try and blow us up that way. And so we had to stand, in strategic points along the ship with our guns there, our rifles there. And if you'd watch the current, because there's a lot of debris in the harbour in Vietnam there in Vung Tau, and if you would see a twig or a branch going with the current and then slightly moving away, that there'd be a person there because it's going against the current. And so you would fire upon that, and you could see the guys scrambling away. And that's when I realised, because I'm watching, but it was quite interesting. I realised that I'm doing my job, but not that much more than that.
Right.
Equally, when you're on the bridge wings and you're looking for aircraft, and you had to report aircraft coming in at a certain angle, if there was a tack angle or something, you had to report that to the officers,
Right.
and so they could act upon it very quickly.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing insight for me, and the stereotypical defense leadership style is do as you're told. You don't need to know much more than that about why and what the mission is.
No.
And all that. Do you feel that in the 54 years that has evolved? Like, could a Vietnam occur today and a seaman actually go out with just
I think
just
like,
going.
yes, I think life is a little bit different today. But look, our young sailors, and I'll talk about the Navy only. I think our sailors are well trained, to do the job that they're supposed to do.
Right.
Warfare is very, very different today, and as you know, my last job in innovation, we're talking about unmanned vessels and underwater unmanned drones and things like that. So warfare is more technologically based than what we did, where we were physically exposed to those elements and looking at the side. Now that still happens, but the warfare is very, very different.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But what I would say is, if we went into war, our people are very, very well trained. I just wish we had more people that were trained.
Wonderful, wonderful. Peter, tell me about the leadership styles. Clearly, in my personal leadership journey, we read the textbooks, we talk about the common leadership styles, whether it's visionary or democratic or, that consultative type style, the affiliative leader, the pace-setting leader,
Yes.
the commanding leader, do as you're told, the hero leader, do as I do, right? And the coaching leader, focusing on growing the best in their people. The stereotype in very hierarchical organizations, traditional organizations like defense, possibly Navy and all that, is commanding, do as you're told. And we can often see the reasons why that's a strength. What has your personal experience been? Has that evolved over time, or because of the critical nature, you always seem to be possibly working under potential life or death situations, that style is still very prevalent and common?
Look, it is. This is very interesting because it is evolving. I'll talk a little bit about the Navy initially, and I'll talk about leadership and management.
Yes.
Because we do a lot of leadership training, and we talk about the autocratic and the democratic, the traditional such styles of leadership. And I thought, this is more management in a lot of cases, in my mind. We work in a bureaucratic organisation. We have rules and regulations. We're governed by or dictated to, if you like, by the government of the day. And leadership sits aside. And I thought, when I was a work study or industrial engineering and I had to do some interviews, instead of sitting in front of a young person in uniform, I sat in front of them in civilian clothes. I put a suit on. And there was a very different relationship. They didn't have to call me sir. They felt more free to talk. So I thought, okay, from that, the empathy, understanding, listening. I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth listening to these guys, and then help them. So I'm more looking at a vision, articulate that vision, and then guide them. And that's just the simple philosophy. And I was interestingly, I was talking to the exercise physiologist yesterday, and he's studying leadership. And I said, and we talked about management and leadership. And I said, look, let's just have a look in this little room here. So there's a small passageway with machinery on each side, And I said, we'll use you as the subject and I'll be the leader. Now, on our left, we've got machinery, we've got some water there, and you can't swim. You're absolutely petrified of getting too close to the water. There's a watchdog at the end there that's going to be barking at you and may attack you. So you have all these obstacles around you, but I want you to reach that wall. And you're going to be scared. And I said, let's picture that. And he said, where are you going with this? And I said, okay, I'm going to, you can hold my hand and I'm going to show you, right, how we get through. All right, you'll be safe. You'll be safe with me and we will reach that wall.
Wow.
And I thought, and it just come to my mind just as after I finished my physiology session, and I thought, yeah, I drove in the car and I thought, yeah, that's leadership. That's leadership.
Absolutely.
Now I could have told him, if I was managing him, very, very differently, right? You take one step forward here, go left there, turn right there, and do that.
Wow.
But that fear is still there.
Yeah.
He still has that, and so I think that encapsulates what I've always believed:
Beautiful.
empathy, trust. People have to trust me, and they do. And I think that's kind of been the area. I listen to them, I talk to them, I don't judge, and I try and show the path. And every team that I've had an open door. Come and talk to me.
That is absolutely fabulous. Even the little things that you decide, right, is so intuitive of you, that people-centered leadership, helping bring out the very best in people. No doubts in my mind about why you became Olympian coach and helped train and elite athletes at the highest level.
I don't think he considered me a leader. He considered me a hard taskmaster.
Oh, really? Wonderful. But certainly I think that even the intuition of you dressing down in civilian clothes.
Yes.
That's, again, we all live with symbolism. And I know that many organizations, they still have some of the management as opposed to leadership. I think you use the term management, right? The autocratic, do as you're told, do as I do style of leadership. And there are many people who, especially in my culture growing up, you listen to your parents, you do not disobey. Listening, a good listener, a good child, a good listener was actually equal to just someone who does what you're told, compliant. It's not active listening. It's not listening with your heart, your mind, your ears. It's very often
and no room
obedient.
for your own thought.
No room for your own thought. Don't question. You're always right. Yeah, and very often in organizations like that, it doesn't matter where it is, Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, US, Paris, wherever it may be, it's very similar. Very often people walk into a room, and if that's the sort of style, and very often they bring this baggage also from their upbringing or schools and from other organizations into it. There's just that deference to someone in a positional authority, which means, I think, from your experience, people are less open to be vulnerable, to try new things, and then that sense that you are just that leader that creates that environment where people can thrive naturally. Because they feel safe, they feel guided by your empathy and your understanding, but still with a very clear goal, and you being there to push them to stretch their comfort zone to get there.
Yeah, but look, it's very interesting, Donnie. They say that most of us work in management styles, and I would say that many people in senior management don't really understand what they want. They don't know what their goal is. And I've been talking to a friend of mine who runs a company called Augment, and he talks about this. If you don't know what your end goal is, how can you performance manage people? How can people trust you? How could anything like this happen? and that's what most of our bureaucratic and large organisations, that's how they operate. If we turned around and said, okay, we know what we want to achieve, and we're going to articulate that, and then we apply our own values. Now, I love the old Navy ones, which was honour, honesty, courage, integrity, and loyalty. And one that was missing was respect. They didn't have in there. Now, if you've got those values, the authenticity, if you have those good values and listen and work with people, then leadership just comes with it. That's how I see it. But if I tell somebody what to do, which I used to do with my daughter, clean your room, make sure you do this and that, and all I ever got, Dad, why are you so strict? Why do you have to be so pedantic? Why does everything have to be so perfect? I didn't understand. I thought that's just normal. But now that I'm older, I could have done it in a much nicer way.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think, and when you speak about authenticity, I sense from your point of view that you're referring to, you talk about empathy, for instance. You talk about, sounding corny, but caring for the people and what they feel and think. And I think that's what part of your values of what drives you. And for you to be authentic with that means that through your behaviors, you're actually more consultative. And at the same time, it sounds like you're always there to help bring out the best in the people, especially when they are probably more resistant to change.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about how do you do that? I know you've trained, elite athletes. And I know that we and I had a conversation about you training someone who was an aerobics.
Aerobics, yes.
Tell us a little about that.
Lauren Farry. Look, again, this is a very interesting little story. Lauren, she was at the AIS and preparing for the Olympics as a gymnast.
Right.
But her coaching wasn't. They didn't like her, and because she was too strict, and they couldn't get fed. So anyway, I was talking to her one day, and she said, "I'd like to try aerobics, and the sport of aerobics, not just the dancing. So it's a gymnastics aerobic type activity, and she said she'll try that. So I said, okay. And I think it was about 6 months later she approached me because she heard that I was coaching. And but she would never talk to me. And I said, if I told her to do something, she would do it. And but she couldn't do a one arm, one leg push-up. She just couldn't keep that balance for some reason.
And it was an important part of the ritual.
It was one of the skills that I wanted to teach her, and she just wouldn't do it. So I rang up the AIS, and they said no, she had some troubles in balancing on the beam and so forth. But she still wouldn't talk to me for 6 months. She never ever uttered a word. She just did as I was told. So
you were her coach.
I was her coach. But she never talked to me.
Right.
I worked on her goal. She said, I want to be world champion, and that was about the best I got out of her. Wow. And anyway, one day I was coming back, as a Saturday morning, I was coming back to my facility, and we sat in the car, and I just asked some question about her grandmother because I remember her saying something, and she just opened up in tears, and she never stopped. The whole car fogged up, and I was in there for about an hour trying to get out of the car because and she wouldn't stop talking, and that changed that relationship. And I thought, just let it go, and I did that. And from then on, we started building a much nicer. She was 14 at the time,
right?
And we built a much nicer relationship, and we started progressing, and I could get her to change some of the things that I didn't like, and what she liked. And then but she still wouldn't do this one arm, one leg push up properly. You know, it was just a little bit off balance. And so I thought, what can I do about this? And one day I just got annoyed with her, and I was sitting in my office and I had my glasses down like that, and I said, Lauren, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm not going to coach you anymore.
Because her mastering that was essential if she was to realize world champion.
It was.
Okay, right.
Well, that was one of the skills, you know, all the techniques and so forth. And I just got so annoyed. And I was looking down at a piece of paper, which I wasn't really doing. And I said, Lauren, training is over. And I said, I won't be training you anymore. And she was so upset. And she started walking out up the stairs, and she took a couple of steps and stopped. And she looked back, and I could see tears. I looked down at my paperwork and didn't acknowledge her. She walked a few more stairs and steps and looked back again. I ignored her. And then she got to the first stair to go up and out of my facility, and I looked at her. And she had tears coming down the side of her face, and I said, "Come back." And she come running back to me, gave me a big hug, and said, "I will try my best." And I thought, I don't know what happened, and it was just intuition. I didn't plan that; it just happened, and I think, you know, I was tough on her, but I think the empathy, you know, looking back at that, right. You know, indicating to her I really cared about her. I really wanted her to. And we went on and, five world championships.
5 world championships.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So,
What's the name?
Lauren Farry.
Farry. Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
Yeah. And she's a lovely, lovely girl. And so it's just one of those moments that work. Something that I don't plan.
Brilliant.
It just
brilliant.
happened. And these are the things that you look back on and say, okay, how do you treat people? And
were you like a world champion aerobics athlete yourself?
No, I was an athlete. Yes, athlete. I wasn't in aerobics. People selected, or like I was given the title of a national coaching director. So I went to a lot of world championships. But they selected me because I was safe. And a lot of people, they pushed the body to the limit, and I progressed the body to the limit, which is a little bit different. And some people were very critical of me because they thought, you know, we've got to move, you've got to be tough with these guys. And I said, no, I don't. I need to develop them. And so they said, you're taking too long. And I said, okay. You can criticize me. I will do it. We'll see what the results are. And so there's always criticism because somebody wants to be, you know, better and get the acknowledgement. And I said no. And so we got through, and
amazing.
So you know, we had a few success stories, not only with Lauren but some of the other athletes that we worked together with and set up a school. And
oh my goodness.
And I was adamant that those schools, we had one in San Diego, one in Western Australia, one in Tasmania, and one in Sydney. And you could come from San Diego and go to the school here, and you do the same program. So I had everything synchronized, you know, so you could be training anywhere. So that was good.
Love that story, Peter.
Yeah.
I think you deserve one of the...
Thank you.
We talk about two contrasting styles. I mean, the 6 leadership styles. One is the commanding, so bark at them, do as you're told, fast, speed, if not, whatever. And you have embraced, you know, what in the books say is a coaching style. You know, one is about getting a result. The other one is, yes, getting a result, but focus first on growing the people.
Yes.
But growing the people is not just about, you know, giving them the technical skills, but very importantly, it sounds like you really focus on the psychology, the drive, overcoming the inner fears, whatever Lauren had about doing that procedure. She would probably have had some fears or negative experiences or pain associated with that activity. But your ability to help her overcome that through being tough, being courageously tough love, if
Tough
you like.
love, yes.
But always for her. And those little moments that you say you spend time in the car with her was all about building that trust, building that rapport, earning that trust, so that when you had that tough love, which is as important part of loving your people, the tough love is equally important, holding them up to their highest potential. They could respond to that, even though it might have been safer for them to disobey or not follow, because they knew where you were coming from. It's for their betterment. Yeah, that's a tremendous anecdote. Thank you so much for sharing that. So looking back at your wonderful leadership journey, if we will look at leaders working under high pressure situations, what would you say you've observed as key traits of or what would you would consider someone a leader others would willingly follow?
I don't think too many people are going to like this, but working in a bureaucratic organisation, we have to follow procedure, and I don't always resonate with the procedure. What I can say, what I think is very, very important in intense operational areas, take 2 steps back and observe, and have a look at how you're going to approach that situation. Now, whether that's with people or whether that's with there's always going to be people involved, because you're going to have to bring those people into that area. If you just calm and step back, and in first aid I learnt that take 2 steps back, assess the situation, make a decision, and then go forward.
Wonderful.
And I think it's a very, very easy process to follow. Every time I jump early, guess what? There's a problem. It always costs me money. If I do things wrong, or do it without thinking, or do it with panic. So just control, 2 steps back and just pause.
Pause, be clear about the outcome.
Clear about the outcome.
Look at the process that's established from a clear-eyed, challenge it if it's doesn't make sense, and do what's right.
And it takes practice. It takes practice, because I'm still learning. I still make those mistakes. I still jump ahead sometimes, but I see the consequences of that.
Right. Peter, you've still got a long career ahead of you.
I do.
Super exciting stuff in the offing. But if you look back now, what are you proudest of? I know you've, you not just in defense, Navy, but training Olympians, all of that, right? Dragon boat racing.
Dragon boating, that was a great achievement. I never expected to, to do that, and 7 world championships.
7 world championships.
That was, I was pretty proud of that. Look, I guess, how I handled my, the career, having that health centre, and turning that from nothing. It was a company that had gone liquidation, and my negotiation. I remember working. It was John Valentine's gymnasium at the time, and they went broke, and so I said to the manager at the time, I said, look, can you let's work together and run this centre at Wynyard, and he said, you can't do that. So I negotiated with the property manager. I said, look, these guys are closing the doors, and anyway, he went to the company, and they wanted $87,000 for this. So I rang my dad and said, can you lend me $87,000? And he said, you've lost your brain, Peter. If you want to make money, go food, beverage, do something, but don't do gymnasium side of stuff. So anyway, I thought, no, and kept my vision. And I went to a lawyer who was arguing with me. He was on the other side, and I said, look, I'm sorry, but they've closed their doors. They have nothing to sell. I said, I will, to just cut it all short, I said, I will pay any outstanding wages and I will pay for one piece of equipment which I want.
Right.
And they, you can't do that. So I said, look, right here, I'll put $8,000 on the table because I knew what their debt was. And I put $8,000 on the table and I said, I'm going in tomorrow, and I was supported by the property man. And another time I cried, I was now in an empty facility, 700 square meters, and I sat in the corner and I thought, now what?
Wow.
Now what? And we turned that in. And one thing I'm very proud of, it was actually recognised as one of the top 5 gyms in the world.
Oh my goodness.
From a small thing, yeah. So that was good, and that was just working with people. And I remember sacking every member because they thought I was too strict being in the Navy. And so I sat in that office with a checkbook when we had checkbooks. And I said, I understand that you're critical of my leadership style. And they said, oh, no, it's all right. And I said, look, I've heard the stories. You don't believe in what I'm doing. And I've looked at them, and here's your check. And so 20 people.
Members?
No, staff.
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 Oh, okay.
I kept 2. All the rest, I wrote a check. They all left. They all had to leave. They were very critical of me.
Right.
I got one girl over to become a coordinator in fitness from Adelaide.
Right.
She's now very, very well known, and Amanda Leasing. Writing books on female and women, having a position in kind of asking what they're really worth. So she became my first coordinator, and I got one more guy, Steve Sheema, and we rebuilt it. And everybody said, lower your prices. And I said, I'm not lowering my prices. This is the quality, and you'll understand the quality. And that's how it happened.
My goodness.
So stubbornness, I think. I don't know.
The entrepreneur Pete.
That was just another story. So I think if I say proud, maybe I think that was an achievement from something I had no idea about.
Wow.
I had no idea it was a risk.
Tremendous spirit, Peter.
Yeah. So that,
just whatever you've taken on, start with that vision, stick with your principles, be resilient, see through, right? I'd love to hear a little bit about that particular story. How did you get into the gym business in the first place? What drove you? You had this wonderful career in the Navy. You were doing this Olympic. Were you already in the Olympic thing?
No.
So, not yet. So this was the thing that maybe led you into that.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Look, it was so bizarre. I at Brookvale in Sydney, one of the suburbs of Sydney, on Friday I just come back from a meeting in Canberra, and I came back early. And I thought I'd go to the gym and have a workout. And Friday afternoon, a gentleman called Julian, he called me over, and they were having champagne. And I asked him this question, why is there such a high turnover in staff at the time? Because that's what I was working on, organisational structures, for the Navy at the time. And anyway, he said, most of them are students. And I said, okay, I understand. And then I had my second glass of champagne, and I thought, I could do this. And he said, what do you mean you can do this? I said, teaching aerobics is easy. And he said, okay, well, I'll introduce you to the manager. And he said he'll be in on Tuesday. So I joined his aerobic class on Tuesday. And I didn't even know the person at the front was the manager. And all I knew was the manager was named Stephen. And he said, can you see that guy at the back there in a blue T-shirt? And they all looked around and they said, I want you to follow him. His name is Peter. And I think I just had a faint heart attack. And I thought, what do I do? That was a glass of champagne that made me say that wasn't reality.
You were just thrown in a deep end.
And yeah.
Oh my.
So I thought, what? And I went back to what I learnt in the Navy and football and sport. So I said, just follow me, guys. And I took them down to Brookvale Oval, which is, the football oval. I took them down there and we run around the oval, and each end we did drop down and did some push-ups and we did some sit-ups because that's all I knew. I knew nothing about stretching. I sprinted them back. I yelled at them because that's all I knew from the Navy. And we took them back to the gymnasium and I said, that's all I know. And they all went clap, clap, clap. And I thought, okay, that was it.
Wow.
And Stephen said, can you work for a younger person? Was my interview question. And he said, yes. And I said, all right. So he gave me a uniform and I studied and I learned, and I studied exercise physiology and learnt all about the body and learnt all about stretching and what works and biomechanics and life went on from there. Yeah.
You're an absolute model of a growth mindset, Peter. Just taking on a challenge because you feel you can do it.
Yeah, I think you feel it.
Oh,
You
my
feel it,
goodness.
and that's
And that little decision in that moment, under the influence of wine,
yes.
subsequently you train a world champion in aerobics. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Man, you are such a
And
extraordinary.
yeah,
Oh my goodness.
well, I appreciate you saying that, but I think I'm Pete.
I know. That humble Pete who,
Pete.
unless I had asked you questions, would not have known this absolute extraordinariness in you. I think that we are all born extraordinary.
But
yeah.
interesting. Well, interesting, and I think I told you about Ian Collins, who's the Mount Everest guy, who I trained him with that, which is another story.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, many, many years later, we reconnected, and he owns a company called Water Ups.
Right.
Which is a wicking company, which is the reason I went to India to expand Water Ups into India. Now, he's the CEO of Water Ups, and I'm now, after 30-odd years, or maybe more, we've reconnected and I'm helping him expand that business into a new country. So there's another challenge. So
Super excited for you.
So I've got two things. Podcasts and Water Ups.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And here you are, retired in February. You're doing courses. You're training yourself, always with a growth mindset. You're helping your friend, who you develop a relationship with through
training him for Everest.
Training for Everest.
Yeah.
And now in the Water Ups is a business. You've just come back from India, helping be an ambassador, right, across that wonderful country. There's so much I'd love to unpack about that, but I think the key message here is you're just this extraordinary model of, we speak about not just lifespan, I think the context of life and in our career, you seem to have such an amazing joy span, truly enjoying what you're doing. And I think one of the traits clearly is growing, giving, today connecting, and just tremendous resilience and adaptability. All throughout. And you being able to infuse that onto others is what, in my humble opinion, makes you a tremendous leader. And I can see why you've achieved all the results you've achieved, because
But I learn from people like you. I learn from other leaders, so that's all what I'm very grateful for.
Thank you. We must do another episode, Peter.
I think so.
And, there's so much more that I'd love to unpack. And yet, perhaps if there was something that you'd like to leave to the audience today that embodies the essence of leadership, someone who's an aspiring leader, emerging leader today, what would you like to say to them?
First of all, you only get one chance in life. But have a vision, spend time on your own, have that vision, believe in yourself, and you can realize that vision, step by step. And I often talk about your core desire. Once you actually see it and visualize it well, and you understand the reason why you want it, and it becomes into your gut as your core desire, nothing can change your direction. You keep that focus. And with leadership, you will be criticised, you will be challenged, you'll have bureaucratic rules and regulations, but don't forget, that star at the end, and that's how I believe it. Whether it's study, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in what we're doing right now. Whether it's in sport, it's very, very important in sport. Having that vision, having that belief in yourself, but you cannot be misled unless you've got that core desire.
Wow, absolutely fabulous. What a great way to conclude this wonderful session. I've had the best joy. Thank you so much for inspiring us. I know that everyone would wish, me included, to have a Peter by our side, a wonderful Sherpa taking us to the top of the mountain, enjoying the journey and bring out the very best in us. And I know that we'll leave in the show notes how people could reach out to you. I know that they will want to, have you as a guest in their podcast, and or just tap into your brain to be a coach or a mentor for them. Would you welcome that?
I would welcome that.
You would welcome that because, you got so much to give, and I know that you get a lot of, just like you get a lot of joy from doing that. But thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you. It's very, very kind.
It's been an absolute gem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.